And this is USL Radio with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, the only show entirely dedicated to the USL.
And welcome to USL Radio. I am Duane Rollins here in Toronto, Canada. Kevin Laramie joins me, as always, in Montreal. Kevin, how are you today?
I am doing great. Season is underway. Every team has started its season. And again, the battery of Charleston, the team we previewed in our first edition, well, undefeated still.
Absolutely, yeah.
You call it the USL Radio bump?
The USL Radio bump. It's a 1 week example on the USL Radio bump, but I think that we're going to find out what happens with Seattle, because that's our feature team this week. We're going to talk about one team every week we're going to feature in on, and that was the Seattle 2, the S2. We have Dave Clark from Sounder at Clark today, who has joined us to talk a bit about what Seattle is doing there, what their philosophies are, what that club means to their MLS side, and what it means just as its own club unto itself.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting because we talked about in the last show, Duane, about the different philosophies of every team, and we're able to see every example of those philosophies on the pitch. If I take it from my experience, looking at Toronto and Montreal, two different philosophies that are similar to each other compared to Seattle too, but you were able to see the difference between the two teams, and in a single game, almost have a microcosm of a season, because during example, just more quickly, we'll touch it later. Montreal got adapted during the game and were better at the end than the beginning. Seattle, because of the more talent and everything they do have, they show a maturity of play that's different. So, and Toronto has a certain level of experience that they didn't have. The other teams don't have, like Montreal, because of their season in League One last year. So, all those different philosophies we talked about last show, we were able to actually see them in action this weekend.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an interesting league for that, the different philosophies. We touched upon that in our first show and how the different philosophies will be at play all year. We're going to do this. I'll let you know on our format a little bit. This is how these podcasts are going to work moving forward. We're going to have each week, as I said a moment ago, a featured team that we're going to talk about. It's Seattle this week. It's going to be Sacramento next week. It was Charleston the week before. We'll get a guest from that market on to talk about it, and we'll just feature in on them so you know a bit more than that. We're going to make sure that because not everyone can follow every game in USL in the same way you might be able to follow a league that has more media coverage, more mainstream media coverage. We're going to go through the scores just so that you have it caught up. We're not going to belabor that because that's kind of dull radio, but we'll make sure we get all the scores out there so that everyone knows. And Kevin and I will talk about one major issue each week as well. This week we're going to talk about what the rapid expansion in Major League Soccer means for the lower levels, and whether it's going to dilute the lower levels to a point that they're getting hurt by that. That's going to be the topic we talk about today. Kevin, let's get into the around the league feature now and put the scores out there. I've watched a few of these games. It's a lot of excitement early on in the season in USL. There's been more goals. I don't know whether that says that the defending hasn't been as good, but
or maybe the attackers are got it better.
Yeah,
more better players total because of the new teams. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to say which. Charleston, it was a week of derbies. The USL set it up so it was derby week, kind of. Charleston, Charlotte was the first game. It was the first game in Charlotte's new philosophies. They were a team that was religious-based in the past, but this year they've come with a new expansion team called the Independents. They lost 3-2 to Charleston, who now are 2-0 on the year, so a good start there for them. Kevin, you were at the Montreal TFC game. How'd that go?
Well, if you're a Toronto FC2 fan, it went really good. 2-0 win for Toronto, which was their second game of the season, losing the first one against Charleston. Montreal was their first game in history, a historical moment at the Big O. First game for FC Montreal in the USL. Basically, the kids from the academy that have graduated to the U23 FC Montreal side, which lost 2-0, but they learned a lot, and that's what they expect for the first couple games.
Yeah, very, very young team for FC Montreal. For those that don't know, even the broadcast, they were referring to them as an academy team. They weren't even really referring to them as a professional team.
Basically, the club is almost branding it as the academy team, too. FC Montreal, to me, is the top team of the academy. It's the top team of that pyramid of the academy.
Yeah, it's essentially an extension of their PDL team next year. So it might be some struggles this year. We'll see. Interesting to watch there. Good game from Moba Booley, who's been the talk of the town here in Toronto for the first couple games based out of TFC2. He didn't score a goal, but he was basically everywhere, set up the first goal.
Dangerous on set pieces. So dangerous on set pieces.
Yeah, interesting player. If you haven't had a chance to watch him yet, do go out of their way to do that. The New York State Derby, the first one there, the Rochester Rhinos and the New York Red Bulls 2, they played to a 0-0, so not a lot of goals in that one.
No, but I have to tell you, Duane, it's fun to talk about the Rhinos once again. Being from Montreal, as you all know now, well, the Rhinos used to be a rival of the Impact, and now refinding that team from my past that I used to love to hate, it's fun to have them back in my conversations every day.
Absolutely. I was listening to an interview with Jesse Marsh today, actually, and he's indicated that there's going to be several of their younger players from the Red Bulls senior team will be in the lineup next weekend against TFC2 in their next game, so something to watch for there. Louisville St. Louis, that was a Louisville win 2-0 there, so that's the first win there and the first game for both of those clubs.
Absolutely, another historical moment. Two new teams in two new markets that are close to each other, and both of them are going to be rivals. And it's fun to see teams. It's going to sound weird, Duane, but colors and kits and identity as a football team is important. It was the supporters gather around, and Louisville and St. Louis with the yes, it's a fleur-de-lis. It does look like the FC Montreal logo, but still, it's different colors. It looks great. Louisville going the purple and light orange shades. It's actually fun to see those different type of looks.
Yeah, and it's great to have St. Louis have a team back too as well. St. Louis is one of the cradle of soccer history in the United States, and they've struggled to find money down there to get a team going. Jeff Cooper is a name that we don't want to dwell on that didn't have anything there when people were sort of suggesting he did, and had some few franchises fail in the past. Unfortunately, a women's team that was just pulled in the middle of the season. So good to have St. Louis back in the fold in some level. Pittsburgh, Harrisburg City, not the best day for Harrisburg. 5-2 loss. I watched that game, Kevin, and it was a bit ugly at times in terms of the keeping and the defending, but a lot of goals, and good for Pittsburgh to get a win. That's a team that
Exactly.
we actually had Michael Johnson on, a member of their supporters club last year on Two Solitudes, our show there, and talked about some of the bankruptcy issues that they had. So it's nice to see that the Riverhounds are getting together on the field anyway, and hopefully they have a solid future moving forward.
Absolutely. And then in a battle of former affiliated club, now a standalone, Wilmington Hammerheads FC versus the Richmond Kickers, a 2-2 draw at Legion Stadium, and it was basically a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, that's I watched that one as well. A couple nice goals off the set pieces there. That was the story of the week a lot if you watched. A lot of goals off the head, a lot of goals off set pieces. I think that's probably an early season defensive not catching up to the offense type thing. Interesting.
When those set pieces goal look like set plays too. That's what I noticed in the USL. And those set plays, for Toronto or any other game that we've seen, those goals off set pieces can have an impact on games.
Absolutely. Tulsa, Oklahoma City, the OKC Energy. That was a 1-1 draw there. First game for both of those teams. Interesting derby. That's not exactly the place of North America where you think of soccer, but
think of barbecue.
You think of barbecue. You think of cows. I don't know. I don't mean to be dismissive of that, but I'm glad to see the game reaching out to all parts of North America.
I have to say, Duane, I have a little place in my heart for the OKC Energy FC because of their coach. If you remember, yes, Nielsen, Puma Nielsen, former goalkeeper for Sporting Kansas City, is the coach for OKC Energy FC, and I love his passion, and he's a character that we don't see every day in soccer, and the fact that he's still around and coaching, I just love it.
Yeah, well, and OKC also beat TFC earlier this year, so there you go. If you want to MLS that up a bit. Austin versus Colorado Springs, the poor people of Colorado, they haven't seen a professional goal yet. Austin beat Colorado Springs 2-0. Of course, the Rapids at MLS have failed to score in 3 games. They failed to lose, too. 3 0-0 draws in a row. That's an interesting start to the season. However, we're not here to talk about MLS. Nice to see the game back in Austin. Of course, Orlando basically, or the original Austin team moved to Orlando, and then Orlando became an MLS side. Austin's now back in the fold. I think that's a city that it's an interesting city. It's weird, Texas. It's nice to see them in the mix. It seems like a place that football, soccer should really fit, right?
Yes, it does. It has a little hipster or not hipster might not be the word, because when we say hipster, we gravitate more towards the Pacific Northwest. But when I think of Austin, I think about South by Southwest. I think about a more progressive type of thinking, and soccer usually is identified with that. So yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, South by Southwest, the music festival there, and they like their countercultural stuff, and soccer still has a bit of that going on.
That's the word, counterculture.
There you go. Arizona United, Orange County, 2-1 win for Arizona there. Standalone teams playing each other. Arizona new team. I think that Arizona club, from what I've heard, should be an interesting team to watch this year. There's a lot of talent around there, a lot of talent on the technical side from what I know of that club. And the final game of the week. Sorry, there's two more games of the week.
Three more games.
The primary game of the week, I think, for a lot of people was Sacramento versus LA2, the Galaxy 2. That's a replay of last year's semifinal. Sacramento, the defending champions, who lost last week 4-2 to Seattle, got a 3-2 win in that, and it was the best game of the week. I watched that after the fact, the highlights of that, and an extended highlights of it. It was a very skilled game, really an indication of all this league can offer.
Absolutely. And then we had a rough first road game for the baby Whitecaps. Vancouver Whitecaps 2 had not an awakening, but more a wake-up call against Seattle Sounders FC 2 4-0 for Seattle against Vancouver. Seattle showing their more experienced side on this game.
Yeah, 8-2 Seattle by aggregate in the first two games over Sacramento and the Whitecaps too. Whitecaps have beaten them in the preseason, so I don't think people expected that type of whitewash. Excuse the sort of half pun there, but certainly not the best start of the season for the third Canadian side there. And the final game of the week was an all MLS 2 matchup as well. The Monarchs, Salt Lake City, and Portland. Portland beat the Real Monarchs 3-1 in that game there for an all MLS matchup. That's the roundabout the league there, Kevin. A lot of scores to get through. We hope you like that. Give us some feedback if you like that segment. We think it's important to get the information out there because, as I said, it is hard to follow all those teams. There's a lot of teams in USL.
Absolutely. And quickly, before we move on, right now, we'll just say the couple of leaders at the table, as mentioned earlier. Charleston Battery, leader on the table, 6 points after 2 games played. Then you got Louisville FC with 3 points and a plethora of teams that are tied. But Charleston, after 2 weeks, the only team that has 2 wins, top of the table.
And Seattle, of course, on the western side is undefeated with 2 wins as well. Seattle is the future team that we're going to come in on and talk about today. Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart. He has joined us, and we're going to bring him on right now.
If you want to ride the Space Needle, or just meet some friendly people, come to Emerald City where nobody's uptight and they know how to make it through a long dark winter night. If you want to kick back, Seattle can do that. If you want.
And welcome back to USL Radio. Duane Rollins here. Fortunately, Kevin Lair may a bit under the weather today, so it'll be me doing it solo along with Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart. Dave and I go way back in the MLS days. Nice to have you here today, Dave.
Oh, it's great talking to you again.
We've talked a lot about MLS over the years, but we've never really talked about USL. So it's an interesting sort of new era that we're entering in here as we go into MLS 3.0, eh?
Yeah, we haven't had the opportunity because Seattle hasn't been in that league since 2008.
Which is about when you started your blog, Sounder at Heart. You were at the first F2 game. You saw the game yesterday against the Whitecaps. Let's start there. What is your general perspective on what S2 is right now in terms of a standalone team, a team in USL?
Well, the goal of the organization is to try to have it be one team. So they're doing some things. And a lot of variance is happening for the 8 teams that are wholly owned by MLS sides. In Seattle, what that means is that they're sending players down on loan regularly. There are 7 players so far that have been loaned down. They'll be primarily playing with S2 rather than the first team. And then I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing that they do is the numbers for both teams. Players that are on S2 and not on the first team do not have low numbers. Like they have a player that's a 99 and a 55 and a 44. And that's so that they, when the players are loaned down, you won't have doubling up of numbers. So the first teamers will get their number throughout the organization. And another interesting thing is that Garth Lagerwey, who's taken over as president of soccer, is really pushing to have a cohesive style of play throughout the organization.
So that's interesting. So it sounds like it's very much they're considering this an extension of F1, we'll call them for now, sort of a reserve side more than a standalone team onto its own. Been very successful so far, though, Dave. You talk about the highlights you've seen in those first two games. Who stood out?
In the first game, it was really the Pablo Rossi show. During preseason scrimmages, and then in that first game, he showed that he has a free kick that's on par with Michel, or when David Beckham was in MLS. He might be a one-tool player, but we've seen that can succeed at the MLS level. And at the USL level, he's even more dominant. His free kick is beautiful. Any stoppage is an opportunity for Seattle to score. Another standout player is a homegrown player who was signed to S1 during this offseason. He had a great college and academy career, Darwin Jones. He put up a hat trick on the Vancouver Whitecaps 2 yesterday. He is kind of in the same mold as an Olufemi Martins, small but strong, extraordinarily fast with a quick left foot. He loves to get a shot off. He can play a little bit out on the wing as well. Those are kind of the two standout performances so far.
I wanted to talk a bit about Rossi. There's a lot of excitement around him. I think it's because of the way he plays, like you say, those spectacular free kicks. Is there a growing pressure to maybe get him onto a full contract, an MLS contract now?
Well, there's this thing. He's got a lot of the problems that South American players have when they come to the league. He goes down easily. He isn't willing to fight through traffic very often. He keeps looking for the perfect pass rather than the simple pass. So there's some things that he needs to do to be able to grow through. At the same point, if you can get him on an MLS contract and put him in as maybe your second sub with 15 minutes left in the game, that gives him 1, 2, maybe 3 free kick opportunities. And if you have him available and you don't have a Clint Dempsey or a Marco Papa to take those kicks, then Seattle's probably a little better off. So I think there will be an opportunity for him. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year he's on an MLS deal and kind of floats between the two sides.
Interesting. Earlier this year, I had a chance to talk to the TFC general manager, Tim Bezbachenko, about the philosophy of TFC2 and how it related to how he approached the draft, the MLS draft. I'm wondering, from your perspective, whether Garth Ledgerway, whether Seattle has done something similar, whether they've approached the way that they selected players in that draft a little bit differently this year because they knew they had S2 there to develop the players.
In the past, what they've done is they've worked through like informal agreements with a place like a Charleston or some of the other USL and NASL teams where a drafted player that they liked but didn't find room for on the MLS roster, they'd send away, and sometimes they'd even wind up taking him back in a year or two. It wasn't really a loan, but it was we're going to try to place you because somebody else will need to develop you because we don't have those resources. This year, instead, what they did, and you're seeing it with an Andy Craven, Charlie Lyon, Juliana Farino is a Canadian that wasn't drafted but would have been drafted if there was another round kind of situation. Those are guys that they put into S2 because of they now have that opportunity. They only have 9 direct signings to S2, so it's not as if they kept all those draftees. Most of them were still cut from the organization entirely.
To end it with this, Dave, been big crowds for the first 2 matches. Certainly an exciting way to start with the win over the defending champions there. What is the excitement level amongst the Sounders faithful for this team?
I think what you're going to see is probably crowds around what the Sunday game was, which is about 2,500. it's a little small, but the venue's right for it. They've actually downsized Starfire this year before they're going to upsize it next year. So their capacity is just under 3,000 as opposed to the 3,500 or 4,000 that they had gotten for the Open Cup. What that means is you're going to get basically the 5% of the most die-hard fans that still have money. It's very affordable, but if you're going to 18 to 20 MLS games, throwing on another 14 to 18 USL games can get a little pricey. But still, it's going to be people who are absolutely dedicated to the organization's entire philosophy. That means the people that are there, even in the higher priced for that lower division, are still going to be enthralled by what they see. You're not going to have a passive fan in Starfire. It's just not going to exist. Plus, they've worked out a way to authorize the use of smoke, safe smoke, kind of like safe terracing exists. There are ways to do smoke in cooperation with the local authorities and the stadium facility. So they're doing that as well, which gives it a nice little buzz and some excitement that you're not going to get at most MLS games.
All right, Dave, most people will know where to find you, but for anyone new that's a USL fan that's found this show, tell them where to find your work.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we're at sounderadheart.com. That's all one word. Our section called The Future is all about the USL and Academy. We're covering that almost as extensively as we cover the MLS games. And you can follow us on Twitter at SounderAtHeart or on Facebook /SounderAtHeart.
All right, great. Dave Clark from Sounder at Heart. Thanks again, Dave.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to USL Radio with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie. You can reach the guys on Twitter at 24th Minute and at Kev Laramie. Or on email, USLSoccerRadio@gmail.com. Support the guys on Patreon, 2 Solitudes, 5 Rings. Help support the coverage of the USL.
Welcome back, and thanks again to Dave for joining us. Dave's always been good this time, so we appreciate that. Sounders look really good. Sounders 2, S2. And when you look at that, I want to give them fairness. We talked about them being a little bit older, a little more experienced, and I think that is the case. These guys are by and large about a year older than what TFC was, as I said last week. It makes a difference at the development level. But at the same time, they're not like 30-year-olds. If you look at Portland's got a lot of guys in their late 20s on that team. Even Vancouver had a couple guys. One that's keeper's 26. Tyler Rosland is 28. So you've got some older guys there. So interesting sort of philosophical differences.
When I was looking at Seattle, the player that really shows how experienced some of those young players can be for Seattle is Loic Rimick, who was one of the fantasy player darling in MLS in 2013, who was getting a lot of minutes, a lot of good playing minutes, making a lot of points, but not costing a lot. And he had a rougher 2014, the sophomore slump, you could say, but now in Seattle too, I think he's going to dominate that league because of the actual experience he had in 2013 with the Seattle Sounders in MLS.
Yeah, I would have to, it's early days, but
yeah.
I think Seattle's got to be one of the favorites so far based on what we've seen to hang 4 goals up. I don't think the Whitecaps are that bad, but they were made to look foolish in that game in a lot of cases. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out moving forward. Mm-hmm. Let's move on a little bit. Kevin, you were at the FC Montreal TFC 2 game on the weekend. First off, what was your overall perception on covering your first USL game?
I really enjoyed what was going on the field. The emotion of the players is a little bit more raw. It's players that are starting, so they have that. They want to be hungry. They were looking at the ball. They're trying. They have to prove themselves. They haven't gained anything. And yes, it's not a level. I don't like to say it's a level above, below. It's not the same. It's just you don't see the same type of soccer. You don't see the same type of execution of either tactics or game plan in those type of games. You see more a reaction type of soccer where players react to what the ball is doing, what the other team is doing with the ball. One thing that was really striking is Zasun Kamara was playing for Montreal he was suspending in MLS play, but he did play in the USL, and he was a level above everybody else, above class and confidence. When he had the ball at his feet, well, just like Philippe Lafroy, the coach of FC Montreal, said in an interview that we have for later on. Well, Kimura is confident on the ball, and that's a different at that level. When you're confident on the ball, you'll try that one thing that the other player is not expecting, which might give you the edge on a one-on-one or on a duel. So that was really striking to me on that game.
Yeah, you mentioned the confidence on the ball. I think you really noticed that at the back, the difference between that and maybe a higher level. I watched that with TFC. There's a little bit of especially in the Charleston game and the first game this year, there was a lot of panic on the ball. When they were at the back line and they needed to clear, they were booting it up the field kind of aimlessly a lot more. Whereas at the top level, you see the guys will have that half-second register of where they are and be able to find the pass, the outlet pass that breaks them out of the trouble a little bit better, a little more effectively than just simply kicking it back out and inviting that pressure back on you. That is one of the major differences between the levels. One of the things in the difference between TFC is a very development-focused team. They're a very academy-focused team. Something like 7 or 8 of their starters were academy-based, but they are a little bit older, a little bit more, they're academy grads. There's more professionals, fully professionals on that team than Montreal. What do you think of the Montreal's philosophy so far this year? Do you think that having seen them play now, albeit against TFC, which is a younger side, that they are going to struggle without some more support coming down from the senior team?
I don't think it's going to be that bad. I think there will be a learning curve first 4, 5, 6 games. But earlier I mentioned a microcosm in one game of what a season can be. They struggle at the beginning. Around before midway, they find their marks. Starting to use their they didn't have an advantage technically, but they used their technical skills to counteract the small physical advantage the other team can have against them. We saw that happen against Ottawa for the last preseason game they had, but the physicality was way bigger for Ottawa. It'd be like a foot taller for everybody almost. But Toronto and Montreal, we saw that through the game. So throughout the game, Montreal were finding their marks, getting better plays, moving forward, and had about 4 or 5 good scoring chances that if somebody could have finished, and 2 posts that could have went in easily, well, the game would have been totally different. And Montreal played a lot better during probably the middle 40 minutes of that game. They had a lapse at the end and struggled at the beginning, but the middle 40 minutes of this game, Montreal actually looked pretty damn good for a group of 20-year-olds.
All right, I get a final question of this. Kevin and I, we're not going to hide the fact of what cities we're in, so we will feature in a little bit on the TFC2 and the FC Montreal as the year goes on, but we are intending to be more of a North American-based show. But that said, as I said, we're not going to hide where we are.
No, but on top of that, Duane, if you are covering any USL team and you have post-game audio, send it to us, USL Radio at USLSoccerRadio at gmail.com, and let us know. Give us the audio, and we'll use it willingly on the show and talk about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make this a North American show. Final thought, though, in terms of it looked like not a bad little crowd that showed up early. It was a couple hours early. They played it at the Big O before the Orlando game, which would have probably had a little bit of excitement in Montreal. But it wasn't a bad little crowd there. What would you say the overall interest is?
I would say, yes, it's the beginning. There was about 1,000, 1,500 people. But it was people want to get to know those people. And I believe if we do our job, me and you, Duane, if other people do their job carefully, there's a lot of characters, a lot of good stories, a lot of great athletes in those teams. And a lot of players, a lot of fans actually played with those players in a different level of soccer. And you get to see those players play with the colors of your city on them. It must be a great feeling to be a fan playing in soccer when you were a kid and seeing a name that you actually played with, making it, even if it's USL. I said that many times. And being the top team of the academy, or the top team of that pyramid as FC Montreal, there's no shame of having a professional career and just playing for FC Montreal. It could actually probably create more professional players that way.
Absolutely. All right. We have some sound that Kevin captured after the game, so we're going to run that now. Then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the overall effect of rapid expansion in MLS to the overall pyramid in North America.
The first game in USL, big momentous occasion, set pieces. How important were the set pieces today, and was it something that was lacking, maybe, a set pieces experience?
Obviously, yes. Especially, bad decision in the box. So even if we're working on it, it's still a decision that the players have to make as fast as possible. And this one, we didn't react. We react too slowly, so that's why we were punished. And that's also a lesson that we have to learn. That at this level, if you're not good, decision making is not good in the box, you will be punished. And it's what happened today.
That's good.
If we're looking at Asun Kamara today, every time he touched the ball, he was creating something for USL. What can you tell the USL team that they can do to achieve same type of control and success that Asun has?
But what you can see in Asun, and it's normal, he's very comfortable on the ball. He's confident with the ball, and that's the lesson that we have to learn for this type of players. You have to feeling, even bigger when you're on the pitch and you beside Asun Kamara. He should and he will, and this type of player will bring confidence to our young players, and that what they have to learn. If they have the skill to play with confidence and calm on the ball, but at the beginning it's a bit normal that they're a bit stressed on the ball because it's the first game in their life at that level. But they can watch him play and say, "Fuck, it's not that difficult, to play." Confident, and then we're gonna have more chance to do the difference on the pitch. And it's what was lacking today. It's a bit of that, a bit of technical skills and confidence on the ball, and Asun show that.
And welcome back. This week, Kevin, of course, it's impossible to talk about any level of soccer in North America without talking about all the levels, because they all kind of mesh in together and they're all sort of part of the same sort of system, right?
Yeah.
So Minnesota's news that Minnesota from the NASL is moving up to MLS in, maybe 2018, 2019. We're not too sure yet. It depends on the stadium and all that sort of stuff. But Minnesota United is, in fact, going to eventually move out of the Division II sort of spectrum of North American soccer in the near future. We wanted to have a conversation about how that affects the pyramid. What happens when you move more teams up to MLS and whether this is a good thing? Let me start there, Kevin. Like, on the surface, we don't have promotion and relegation in these countries. But we do have sort of a financial promotion and relegation, and this is an example of it. Do you think this is necessarily a good thing? Does it help soccer to have these markets, these bigger markets, pull out of the lower tiers?
I think it does, because when it's done for the right reason, when it's done because the fan support and the growth locally of a team is there, like in Minnesota and Orlando, those type of team from the USL or NSL that graduated to the MLS. If you're looking at Orlando, after 3 weeks, we have to say it's a success. They had about 120,000 people for a team from USL to the MLS. You have to say they did pretty good. If you're looking at Minnesota, with a team that's organized, with a group that's 100% focused solely on the soccer club, it wouldn't have been the case if they would have gone with the Minnesota Vikings group. No, they went with the Minnesota United, and it's going to be great for that eventually. What I do believe is it creates a small void or vacuum when you take one team from a lower level to bring it to the top. But when a vacuum appears in the world, nature is beautifully built that way. Then when a void happens, something else comes to fill that void. And when you get a new team, when you get a new market, it creates some positivity. It brings a different type of feeling. It brings a new team, so you get new fans, new coverage, new cities involved. It changes, and it makes the league interesting from year to year when it changes. The caveat of that is, if you're a team, you lose your team, you like the feeling of it, then it moves maybe to a different stadium that it's not close to you, or you can just, a team that's not doing well can just dissolve. Those things do happen in the lower level, so it seems like it's going to be always a changing landscape in a lower level, because it does change more rapidly than the MLS. The scale of things are a lot smaller, but they do change a lot faster.
Yeah, I think that the stability is the key there. And if you look at a lot of these standalone USL teams, I think there is a lot of stability there. Charleston's been around for a long time.
They're the one who stayed over the years. We've all seen the small one close over here, like the Fusion, all those, right?
Wilmington, Rochester. There's a lot of unique clubs that have been around for a long time, and I think their history at that level is really worthwhile and something to celebrate. My only concern when you have rapid expansion like we've seen in MLS in the next few years is what that means for the talent pool. Mm-hmm. However, when we're talking about USL level, I mean, the MLS, it's a different discussion at MLS level, and we're going to put that aside, and maybe we'll talk a bit about that on Two Solitudes, Kevin. But for this show, does it really does it trickle down to the USL level? That's the question I have, and I wonder about that. Now, I'm of two minds. I don't know about you, but I'm of two minds. I think that, yes, you're going to lose some of that 27, 28-year-old sort of journeyman talent is going to bump up a level because you're going to need the bottom of the MLS rosters are going to need to be filled out, and there will be guys that want to chase that MLS dream even if they get a little less money to do so, which is kind of the dirty little secret in North American soccer, that often you make more money as a NASL starter than you do or a USL starter than you do as a MLS backup, right?
Yeah.
However, there's always going to be that young up and coming that are going to need places to play, and I think you're seeing this with the USL MLS partnership. And I guess that's the focus point there, is that USL MLS partnership and what it means in terms of putting those future stars in USL. Does that ultimately, Kevin, do you think push out that other level, that level that we can't really define, the NASL? Do you think that that's the real risk in this?
Yes, I think it is. And I think the best way to explain this is you said, I can remember if last week's USL Radio Two Solitudes, it was a soccer show we did together last week, where you mentioned that the skill and talent ceilings for the kids is always higher than for a older squad. And when you have new teams that are associated with an MLS, you do get a younger team in the USL, and you do get academy-based teams like we see Montreal, Toronto, and those type of clubs with those philosophies. And that included, well, if we go with the saying that you said, that the talent and overall skills level, the ceiling of it is higher when you're younger if you're trained properly and from the academy. That's what we're seeing. I think long term, it's going to bring up the level of play on the field because you go younger, it'll take a couple of years. The league's going to get older together, but that skill level is going to be higher, and the type of soccer you're going to play is be more interesting.
Absolutely. And I think that, if you listen to the USL and the leadership at the USL, they talk about even expanding their footprint further and further and further. I don't think there's any fear within the business aspect of these leagues that they can overexpand. Now,
because sustainability is really important for. I don't know if it's the right word, but that's really important for the league. Every team needs to be sustainable.
Yeah, and you want to develop your own markets. And I think if you have, eventually you see all of the 20 MLS teams or whatever amount they get to having secondary teams or at least strong affiliates somewhere, that really adds an influence of young talent into the league. And then if you have, you can reach out to those mid-level markets, those 250, 500,000 metro population markets out there, which are never going to get to an MLS level, not even going to get to an NASL level, assuming the NASL survives long term. It is really something that's needed, and it can reach out and be a youth feeder thing. I think that's ultimately what we should hope for, and that's the one area that I still have criticism with. Some of these clubs, most of these clubs even, don't necessarily fit on top of any natural pyramid. They're standing alone as their own little planet out by themselves, and I think they need to get more integrated and start to concentrate on integrating down. I think that's the key.
You just start with a U13, or U14, or U16, and then whenever those kids graduate, you add a younger team every time. That's how you build an academy.
Well, yeah, that should be, to me, a lot of people get caught up in these little infights within North American soccer, and they sort of lose the focus. I don't care what the leagues are called.
Yeah, exactly. As long as somebody's playing soccer.
Yeah, so long as there's games happening and there's local communities have a top level to play for. But we do need to really focus on down integrations or up integrations into a pyramid so that you have a natural flow for a player to graduate from A to B to C to D to eventually professional. And that's what needs to happen. And you need to have footprints in a lot of places because North America is a very unique market. And we have this whole conversation without even touching on what makes it even incredibly unique, and the fact that there's two countries involved in this pyramid, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that two pyramids have different needs, different wants out of this old soccer player professional thing for their own national team program. So you're right. On top of it, there's two solitudes included in that debate, that two different countries with two different... you can say the Canadian teams are going to stick together a bit because three of them together have more power. But if you like, all the teams in the U.S. are more by themselves, but there's a lot more U.S. teams, and it's interesting to see now there's rumblings that there's going to be new NASL team in Canada eventually. Who knows? Maybe they'll be in the USL before that. that talking point continued to get bigger and bigger with every week.
Yeah. I mean, real quickly on the Canadian front, we focus more on this on Two Solitudes, of course, which the name Kevin just hinted to for American listeners what that name means. Means that there's two separate entities that have two different that are standing side by side and typically together, or technically together, but have different needs, and it's a double entendre based on Canadian history, and we'll leave it at that. But at any rate, is there a need to maybe look at the fact of bringing more standalone USL teams into Canada? Would that be something that would make a lot of sense from a Canadian development perspective? We talk about the need for having our own league up here, and that's something that I believe very strongly in. But is the first step in getting our own league, getting clubs going in various parts of the country? And I kind of am more and more leaning that way lately.
Yeah, I'm a yes, unequivocal yes. With what I experienced on Saturday, talking to those players from the USL team Montreal, yes, you need to get those team on the pitch. Those players, I have those 20-something players that did touch the pitch because there's a lot of change in the USL. Yes, some of them are going to become professionals. It's just it's bound to happen. So just get them playing. That's all I want. And if it's in the USL, well, be it.
Yeah, I think that eventually I think there needs to be a plan. This isn't the Canadian show, so we're not going to go into this details, but there just needs to be a plan to move it forward to eventually have them in at least their own conference of some kind. And I think that would be a long-term vision. It's something that USL or NASL even, but this is USL show, so we'll stick with USL, should really be working with the CSA to try and help them meet each other's needs. And we don't often and always see the American side of that equation working with the Canadian side as effectively as I think they could to benefit both, because there is a benefit to both. If you have a stronger Canadian pyramid enhancing the American pyramid, then both countries gain from that. And I don't necessarily think we always see that happening. But as I said, Kevin, that's a topic more for our other show. I think on that note, Kevin, that this would be a good time to say goodbye for week 2 of USL Radio. We'll be back next week. We have a great guest booked from Sacramento. That's going to be our feature team next week. In the meantime, Kevin, I'll let you say goodbye.
Enjoy your USL coverage here on USL Radio, on Canadian Soccer News, written stuff on the Canadian team. And if you have any questions, comments, reactions, audio from your respective USL team, or want to be a guest on the show, USLSoccerRadio@gmail.com.